I've spent a ridiculous amount of time testing the brand new Galaxy Z Fold 6 against the previous generations in over a dozen different categories to see which old folds are worth upgrading to the Fold 6. And I guarantee you'll know for sure by the end of this video. And the reason you won't see the Fold 2 or the original Fold in this video is because if you still have one of those, then yes, absolutely, the Fold 6 is 100% worth the upgrade, especially with Samsung's limited time free storage upgrade and huge trade-in and bundle deals that I have linked in the description and pinned comment. Let's start with the physical differences because some of these changes are pretty significant. And the most obvious thing when looking at the phones on the table is that the Fold 6 cover screen is now wider, and that can really be seen in this comparison shot. And it does make a difference for the cover screen usability. In fact, I've personally found myself using the cover screen a whole lot more often on my Fold 6 than I did on any of the previous Folds. That said, I would still like it to be just a little bit wider, like this Z Flip 5 for example. And just for reference, here's the width compared to an S24 Ultra and an iPhone 15 Pro Max. The Fold 6 also has smaller bezels, and even this hinge section is more narrow compared to the previous generations. You can see that there's so much space taken up by the hinge on the Fold 3, but on the Fold 6 you have almost the exact same border on the hinge side as you do on the button side. And the difference is still huge even if you compare it to the Fold 4 or the Fold 5, so Samsung's doing an excellent job of making this hinge as small as possible. You also notice that Samsung's now gone with more squared off edges instead of the round edges on the previous Folds. And the other significant difference is that the Fold 6 is now much lighter than the previous Folds. In fact, the Fold 6 now weighs just about the same as the S24 Ultra. And this difference is actually noticeable when holding a previous generation Fold versus the Fold 6. And I'll put the weight of the Folds at the top there just so you can see the actual differences. Flipping over to the back of the Folds, you can see slight differences to the camera array year over year, with the most noticeable difference being that these rings around the cameras on the Fold 6 are actually much larger than any of the previous versions. I don't know if that's just a styling thing or for better camera protection, but that change is there. And these cameras actually do stick out further than the previous generations as well. But that could also be because the new design is slightly slimmer, giving less space for the cameras inside the body. And while we're looking at the bottom, you'll notice that the speaker grill is now a slit instead of a bunch of individual holes, and that's true on both the top and bottom. Something that started with the Fold 5 and is now carried on with the Fold 6 is that fold flat design. And when compared to the Fold 3 and Fold 4, you can see that there is a really big difference in the gap here. And having this fold flat design definitely helps protect the screen by keeping debris and other small objects from getting into these gaps. And besides that, it also just looks a lot more premium to have this flat folding design. When it comes to opening and closing the Fold, there is a noticeable difference there as well. So on the Fold 3, when I open this, it takes a bit more force to start the opening process. And as I open it all the way, it kind of stops wherever, but it doesn't snap to the open position. And the same is true for the Galaxy Z Fold 4. It's a bit more force to start opening it, and when you get it all the way open, it doesn't snap open, it just kind of opens to whatever position you stop it at. The Fold 5 opening gets a bit closer to how the Fold 6 works. It's a bit less stiff to get it started opening compared to the previous two generations, but it is still not quite as easy to open compared to the Fold 6. But when you do get it most of the way open, it does snap into place. And the Fold 6 is noticeably easier to get started opening. Like, it stays closed just fine. I'm not worried about it opening by itself, but the amount of force required to start opening it is actually significantly easier than the previous generations, and that's a good thing. And as I get this all the way open, you'll see it just kind of pop open at the end to a full open position. And that is indeed fully open. In terms of opening angles, the minimum fold angles are actually pretty similar across all of the devices, but the maximum fold angles are a bit different. The Fold 3 isn't able to get nearly as steep of an angle as the other Folds before it closes. But this only really matters when watching content on the cover screen at a really steep angle. Speaking of using these devices in a partially folded position, the Flex window, which gives you app-specific controls on the bottom half of your phone, or can even turn your phone into a mini laptop with a touchpad, now has a scroll wheel when you're in any app that supports scrolling. And it now automatically dims the bottom half of the screen when it's not in use, helping to save some battery life. To activate this mode, just partially fold your phone, then tap the Flex window icon when it appears. Taking a look at the inside screens, the first thing that most of you are probably wondering is how does the crease feel compared to previous generations? And there is actually a significant difference here. Compared to the Fold 3, like this is a really deep ridge that you can certainly feel when you run your finger across it. And then it gets slightly less deep when you move to the Fold 4 and a little less deep when you go to the Fold 5. But when you go to the Fold 6, it is much, much less deep. It's far less noticeable on the Fold 6. Now take that with a grain of salt though, because this is a brand new device and it comes packaged open. So this hasn't spent nearly as much time in the folded position as the previous devices. And only time will tell if this crease gets more noticeable over time. But also keep in mind, your fingers never really run across the crease during normal use anyway, because when you're using the phone in portrait mode, your fingers are off to the sides, and when you're using it in landscape mode, your fingers are below the crease. So even if this had a super deep crease, you'd rarely notice it in day-to-day use. Another thing you'll notice right away is the difference in screen sizes. For example, the Fold 3 has a taller but narrower screen compared to all of the devices that come after it, and you can really see that width difference compared to the Fold 6. The inner screen on the Fold 4 and 5 look identical in terms of dimensions, and compared to the Fold 6, the Fold 5 screen does appear to be just marginally taller than the Fold 6's screen, maybe by 0.5 millimeter. But the Fold 6 screen is a little bit wider, and you can see that when I put them right next to each other. While the display specifications may look similar on paper, there's clearly a massive difference between these devices when you put them side by side with a high dynamic range video. This is because each newer device has a higher max brightness, so the Fold 3 is significantly dimmer than the rest of the Folds. Then the Fold 4 and 5 are pretty closely matched with a slight improvement to brightness on the Fold 5. And the Fold 6 adds a bit more brightness as well, making it noticeably more bright than the Fold 4, but it's a marginal improvement over the Fold 5. And switching to the inside screens, we get pretty much the exact same results, but the Fold 5 screen seems a bit dimmer here than the last test. Bottom line, you'll notice the biggest difference upgrading to a Fold 6 from a Fold 3 or 4, but only a slight difference upgrading from a Fold 5 in terms of display quality. Something else worth pointing out here is the size of the black bars on each of the phones. While the Fold 6 does have the widest screen, since it's not taller, it actually just gets larger black bars, but the video size remains the same if you want to have the entire video shown on the screen. But if you're willing to crop in on that video and lose some of what's happening on the left and right side, then the Fold 6 does give you the largest screen. The improved maximum brightness also helps with screen visibility in direct sunlight for both the outer and inner displays, but the difference isn't as significant on the inner display in my testing. While I have all these open, I do want to point out one common complaint I hear with the Z Fold line specifically, and it's that over time, the folding mechanism stops working as well, and it's hard to get the device to open all the way up. And I have noticed that slightly on the Galaxy Z Fold 3. If I tip this up a bit, you may be able to see that it doesn't fully open all the way. It's pretty close, and if I give it a little press like this, it does actually finish opening all the way. But I think I know why that's happening over time, and I think it has to do with these small gaps on either side of this hinge. And as I open this, you'll see that the backbone of the hinge disappears behind the back of the phone and the front of the phone. And as this slides open and closed, if you have dirt or debris right along these edges and they get pushed underneath this, it's going to be awfully difficult or near impossible to clear that out. And if you do that enough times, all of that dirt and grime is going to prevent this from being able to fully open. And speaking of dust and debris getting into this hinge, the Galaxy Z Fold 6 is now IP48 dust and water resistant, but that's a little bit misleading because the IP4 rating is dust or debris larger than 1 millimeter, and sand as well as a lot of other debris is actually smaller than 1 millimeter wide, so don't expect this to stop a bunch of beach sand from getting in it. But regardless, that's still a significant improvement over all of the older folds. And while we're talking about durability, all of the phones also get incrementally stronger frames and displays throughout the years. But my folds have always been pretty durable, so I wouldn't make this a main reason to upgrade. Another really important thing to consider with the crease is how much it interferes with the S Pen. And since the crease is a lot less noticeable on the Galaxy Z Fold 6, it has less of an impact on being able to write on the screen. You can still feel it a little bit when you run the S Pen over the screen, and the harder you press down, the more you'll feel it. But even when pressing down lightly on the Fold 5, Fold 4, or Fold 3, you still do really notice that crease. So if you do a lot of drawing or you take a lot of handwritten notes on your Fold, it will be a bit easier to do that on the Fold 6. That said, if you are going to be doing a lot of writing, it'll honestly just be best to rotate your phone at 90 degrees. So now when you're doing any writing, you're going to either be above or below the crease and just slide the page up and down and not have to write on the crease at all. While we're talking about the S Pen, it's important to point out that it's still a separate purchase. It does not come with the Fold 6. And there's still no slot on the Fold to hold the S Pen either. So if you want to carry the S Pen around with you, it's best to get a case that you can fit it in. And Samsung's official case is great for that, but I'm honestly not a huge fan of the color choices, especially since the only one that matches my blue Fold is the one that comes with a pink pen. The Torres MagSafe and S Pen case is another great option. The S Pen just slides into this side slot here and snaps into place, but it does make the phone a little bit harder to use because now you have to reach across a wider bezel. And another important thing with this case is that it doesn't come with the S Pen. You will have to buy that separately. And no, this isn't sponsored. This is actually the case I purchased to use with my Fold 6, specifically because of the MagSafe capability. But I've honestly been using Samsung's official case a lot more because having this extra space right here does take a lot of getting used to. Regardless, if you want to check either of these out, I'll leave links to them in the description and pinned comment below. While the functionality of the S Pen is the same across all of these devices, the Fold 6 does have some different features. Specifically, if we look at the S Pen shortcuts, you'll see that they're mostly the same, but as I scroll further down, you're going to start to see some differences. For starters, the Smart Select feature on the Fold 6 now has AI enhancements, and this makes it a whole lot easier to select specific text or specific images just by tapping. But you can, of course, circle to select things as well, and resize the box to select exactly what you want. You also now get this sketch to image option, which takes anything you draw and uses AI to create a more styled image of it. There's even a version of this in the Gallery app that allows you to draw a basic outline and turn it into a realistic looking thing. Like this cat on my shoulder, for example, or even this dragon that's accurately interacting with the sun in the picture. But it's not all good news because you also lose some features on the Fold 6. Specifically, you no longer get live messages, AR Doodle, Bixby Vision, or Glance. These features are a bit more involved, and I've already uploaded a deep dive video onto all that the S Pen can do. So if you want to see more on these features, you could check out the other video by tapping or clicking the card above. Now it's time for a speed test. I've got the Fold 3 through the Fold 6 in order right here, and I've also included the S24 Ultra and iPhone 15 Pro Max to give you guys an idea of how the Folds compare to some other flagship devices. And the first thing we're going to do is an export test using LumaFusion. So this is the exact same 4K video that's about 20 minutes long, and it has a Gaussian blur applied to the whole video, which is a pretty processor intensive task. And we're going to see how long it takes each of these to export the video. And we've already run into our first issue with the Fold 3 because this screen is not wide enough to show the icon here and it doesn't resize appropriately. So I'm going to have to turn this sideways in order to get into the menu and start the export. All right, so let's go ahead and start these exports now. And I'm just going to stop the iPhone at about halfway because this test is going to take forever if I let that run to the end. And these are pretty surprising results. I wasn't expecting the Fold 5 to come in first place. I thought for sure it'd be either the iPhone or the S24 Ultra. But the rest of the order pretty much makes sense. And I know someone's going to say the iPhone should have won the export test, but I tested this over and over and over again with different videos, different export settings, even different applications, and the iPhone consistently lost. The only time the iPhone won was when I recorded a 10-bit HDR video on each phone and exported it in the Adobe Rush app specifically. Now it's time for a quick benchmark running Steel Nomad on a 3D Mark. So these results are exactly what you'd expect, with the S24 Ultra having the top performance, then the Fold 6, 5, 4, and 3 in that order, and the iPhone kind of lands between the Fold 6 and the Fold 5. But what's super impressive is when you look at the Fold 3 to the Fold 6, like that is a massive difference in performance. You get a 3x improvement in performance and a doubling of the performance compared to the Fold 4. And I think that will be very noticeable with gaming. If you're coming from a Fold 5 to a Fold 6, you'll notice a little bit of a difference, but it's not going to be dramatic. And we're going to finish the speed test with Geekbench 6. These results are pretty much what you'd expect. You have the multi-core score increasing from the Fold 3 all the way up to the Fold 6. And the single core score between the Fold 5, 6, and S24 Ultra is all within a margin of error. So in terms of performance, these three devices are going to be pretty much identical. But if you're coming from something like a Fold 3 or 4, you're probably going to notice a difference jumping to the Fold 6. And the iPhone has the highest performance in both single and multi-core. But when you look at the real-world tests like exporting a video, it doesn't seem like you're getting that much performance there. In terms of general performance when opening and closing applications, I really don't think you're going to see much of a difference at all between any of these devices, especially for any social media type applications. The only place I could see you noticing any significant differences would be processor-intensive applications, like maybe some video editing or something like that. But generally speaking, upgrading to the Fold 6 is not going to give you much of a difference in terms of simple tasks. For the battery life test, I started all these devices at 100% before doing the speed tests, and I made sure they were set to their max brightness. After the speed test, I watched the same YouTube videos on all of the devices for about 44 minutes, then finished up by downloading a movie on Disney Plus and watching it on all devices for about 2 hours. And with the current battery percentages shown at the top, it's pretty clear that if you're coming from a Fold 4 or older, you are going to see a significant increase in battery life moving to a Fold 6. But if you're coming from a Fold 5, you're not going to see much of a difference at all. And just to give you guys a full picture of the battery life on the Z Fold 6, after more than 24 hours and nearly 10 hours of screen on time at the maximum brightness, plus over 14 hours of standby time, I still have 5% left. And that includes all of the tests from yesterday, including the benchmarks, the video exports, a 2-hour movie, over 3 hours of YouTube, and more. And after 30 minutes of charging with a 25-watt charger, which is the fastest that the Fold 6 can charge with, I'm back up to 47%, which will give me about a half a day or more of battery life. But if I plug this back in and pull down the notification shade, you'll see that it'll take about a full hour to finish charging the last 50%. So while getting back to 50% is pretty quick, a full charge still does take a bit of time, especially when compared to the competition. And I'm back with one more battery life update after about a week of using this phone, and I've consistently gotten at least a day of battery life with an average of 6 hours of screen on time. So unless you're doing really power-hungry things like filming 4K video all day long on your Fold 6, most people should be able to get through an entire day without any issues. Now we're going to do a speaker test with a high-end Rode NT-G3 microphone placed pretty close to the phones, and let me know what differences you guys hear in the comments below. Based on what these sound like in person, I'd say that if you have a Fold 3, it's a significant upgrade to the Fold 6 in terms of audio quality, but if you have a Fold 4 or 5, that upgrade is a bit more incremental. Now we're going to talk about the camera quality differences between all of these phones, starting with the specs, then jumping into some actual samples. So starting with the Fold 3, you get three 12-megapixel cameras with a 0.5 times, 1 times, and 2 times zoom option, and a max digital zoom of 10 times. The front camera is a 10-megapixel camera, and the inner camera is an under-display 4-megapixel camera, which just means it's hidden behind the screen when you're not using it. Looking at the Fold 4, we get our first big change with a jump to a 50-megapixel main sensor, and the telephoto camera drops to a 10-megapixel sensor for better low-light performance and increases its optical zoom from 2 times to 3 times, with a digital zoom now going all the way out to 30 times. The ultra-wide camera remains 12 megapixels, but becomes a bit narrower at 0.6 times zoom. The front camera and inner camera remain the same at 10 and 4 megapixels respectively. And the Fold 4 also introduces 8K video recording for the first time, and that's at 24 frames per second. The Fold 5 was a pretty lackluster upgrade with basically the exact same cameras as the Fold 4, with the only exception being an upgraded 50-megapixel main sensor for better low-light performance, and the Fold 5 also gets a bump to 30 frames per second with the 8K video recording. Other than that, it's the exact same camera setup. The Fold 6 is also a pretty underwhelming upgrade with the exact same cameras you got as the Fold 5, with the only difference being an upgraded 12 megapixel ultra-wide sensor, which helps get better low-light photos with the ultra-wide camera. So those are all the specs, but how do the pictures actually compare? Let's take a look. Starting with a high dynamic range test to see how well the photos capture really bright and dark areas at the same time, we get some interesting results. The Fold 3 actually performs incredibly well, likely due to the larger pixels in its 12 megapixel sensor compared to the 50 megapixel sensors in the other three phones. Even coming back later and taking the photo again, the Fold 4 loses detail in the green playset covering, and the Fold 5 is darker than the rest of them with no improvement to the sky color. And the Fold 6 pretty much looks the same as the Fold 5 with a slight boost to brightness. To be honest, I kinda prefer the Fold 3's camera in this test, but this doesn't tell the whole story. When you start to use the zoom on the cameras, things change dramatically. The Fold 3 starts to look like garbage at 10 times zoom compared to the rest of the Folds. And when I add the S24 Ultra to the comparison, you can see that the Fold 6 has a similar level of detail, but the S24 Ultra has more background blur. Punching into 20 times zoom really highlights the differences between the Folds. But since the Fold 3 is only capable of 10 times zoom while taking photos, I had to zoom in manually in my editing software to match the zoom levels for the next couple tests. This is also where the S24 Ultra really starts to crush the quality of the Folds, and it only gets worse from here. Not only is there significantly more detail in the center of the flowers on the S24 Ultra, but the colors also look much better. At 30 times zoom, you can see the Fold 5 and 6 have slight variations in colors, and the Fold 6 gets a marginal increase in detail in the green leaves. The Fold 5 and 6 are also a bit brighter than the Fold 4 here, and the Fold 3 is blurry and unusable. But then the S24 Ultra shows up and makes all of the other photos look like they were shot with a potato. And this is exactly the reason why I always take an S Ultra series phone with me when I'm going on a vacation, or if I want to get good zoom photos. Samsung's Folds just can't compete in this department. Next, we're doing a night photo comparison of the ultra-wide cameras because that's where Samsung says we'll see the biggest difference, and they aren't wrong. The Fold 3 is incredibly dark with horribly inaccurate colors. The Fold 4 is the most true to life here in terms of brightness and colors, but it's still pretty dark. The Fold 5 adds much more detail, but also a bunch of smudging in the shadows. The Fold 6 adds a stitch more detail in the dark areas at the cost of some color accuracy. And if we add the S24 Ultra into the mix, you get another bump in detail, including the addition of some stars. Turning the umbrella lights on changes the results a bit, giving the Fold 6 the most accurate colors and the most detail, along with a significant reduction in noise. However, the dark areas get over-brightened, adding a blue haze. If I could have my cake and eat it, I would take the detail of the Fold 6 with the clean dark areas of the Fold 4. And here's the S24 Ultra's camera for reference. The blue haze is gone, and the colors are even more accurate. Switching back to the main one-time zoom camera, you can see that the Fold 3 looks as good, if not better, than the Fold 6, thanks to the larger pixels in the Fold 3's 12 megapixel sensor versus the smaller pixels in the Fold 6's 50 megapixel sensor. That said, the Fold 6 does look better than the Fold 4 and 5 with significantly less blotchiness. And surprisingly, the Fold 5 is the worst looking with significant blotchiness. Adding the S24 Ultra in, you can see that the S24 Ultra has the sharpest image, but the Fold 6 is pretty comparable in terms of brightness, and the Fold 3 is still looking pretty good. Turning the umbrella light on further highlights the poor performance of the Fold 5, with again loads of greenish blotchiness on the table. And adding the S24 Ultra back in, we again see similar performance, and the Fold 3 still looks great. Which really drives the point that larger pixels are almost always better than more pixels when it comes to low light performance, even when pixel binning is used, which basically combines pixels into groups to get better low light performance. When it comes to the cover screen camera, the results are pretty much the same across all of the Folds with minor differences. And when you open the Fold up and use the under display camera, well, that somehow got worse on the Fold 6. While the colors are the most accurate, there's now ghosting around my ears in most of the photos I take, and the image isn't as sharp as the previous Folds. But at least it's better than the ultra bluish purple colors I was getting out of the Fold 4. The Fold 3 is the best here, likely because it doesn't have as many display pixels covering the camera. And even trying photo after photo with the under display camera, the Fold 6 rarely gets a sharp photo, but it is technically possible after enough tries. Regardless, the bottom line here is that you shouldn't use the under-display camera for anything except video calls when you have your screen open. And speaking of video, when doing a 4K panning test, you can see that the Fold 3 is stuttering a good amount. The Fold 4 still stutters a little bit, and there's only one stutter on the Fold 5 with no stuttering on the Fold 6. But this is only a problem with slow panning shots. If you aren't slowly panning, the stuttering goes away on the older folds. When it comes to stabilization, the Fold 3 has some obvious sway and wobble, with the Fold 4 making a noticeable improvement, but still wobbling and shaking a bit when some steps are taken. The Fold 5 improves the shake that was happening on steps, and the Fold 6 is significantly smoother than the Fold 3 and 4, with a slight improvement over the Fold 5. And let me know in the comments below which phone you think is producing the best image. Besides image quality improvements, each new Fold gets a faster and faster shutter speed, making it easier to not miss capturing a moment. And in this test, the Fold 6 is even substantially faster than the Fold 5. The Fold 6 also gets upgraded super slow motion recording, where you can now record for an unlimited amount of time instead of just 1 to 2 seconds like on the previous generation Folds. But the way you do it is a bit different now. Instead of having a dedicated super slow motion mode like you did on previous Folds, you now just go into the regular slow motion mode, and make sure your slow motion mode is set to Full HD at 240 frames per second. Now you just record your video, then navigate to your video in the gallery and tap the pencil icon to edit it, then tap the 1/8 text, then tap it again, and change that to 1/32. This will give you the equivalent of a 960 frame per second video, and here's a sample from my S24 Ultra to give you an idea of what that actually looks like. Now let's talk about the software differences between these devices, and the most obvious difference is going to have to do with Galaxy AI. On the Fold 6, you get a dedicated Galaxy AI menu with all of the AI features. On previous generations, you have to scroll down a bit and go to the Advanced Features tab, and you have this Advanced Intelligence option at the top. But on the Galaxy Fold 3, you don't get that option at all because none of the AI features have come to this device. And I'm not sure if they're ever going to come to this device. But when looking at the Fold 4 and 5, you can see that you get the exact same options, and the Fold 6 adds some new options. And I actually already did a super deep dive on all of these features that you could check out by clicking the card above if you're interested, so for right now I'm only going to show the differences. Since the Fold 4 and 5 have the exact same features when it comes to the Advanced Intelligence options, I'm just going to compare the Fold 5 to the Fold 6 so you guys can see the differences. Now, Call Assist and Phone are actually the same thing with the exact same options, they just change the naming of it. Chat Assist and Samsung Keyboard are again pretty much the same, but the Fold 6 gets this new Composer option, as well as the Suggested Replies option. The Composer allows you to create a full message based on just a few words. And this works in any application. All you have to do is tap the Galaxy AI icon while your keyboard is open, and then tap the Composer option. Then you just type a short version of what you want to say, select the format that it's going to be in. You can either pick standard, email, social media, or comment, and select the tone of the message, either polite, casual, or professional. Then tap Generate, and it'll write out an entire message. If you don't like what it wrote out, just tap Refresh, and it'll give you a different version. And you can, of course, edit that text to include whatever you want. And when you're done, you can either tap Copy or Insert to add it directly to the message. And Suggested Replies is enabled when you have a Galaxy Watch on One UI 6 or higher connected to your phone. This will actually analyze your previous messages and give you much better suggested replies based on the context of the conversation. Interpreter adds a new one-way translation feature, so if I pull my notification shade down on both of these and tap the interpreter toggle, you'll see that you now have this new 3-bar menu on the top left, and if you tap this, you can switch to listening mode, and what this will do is translate everything that the phone is hearing in real time right on this screen. And this would be useful if you were on a tour in another country and they were speaking in their native language. This would allow you to have everything interpreted into your native language so you can follow along with what the tour guide is saying. Besides the new listening mode, if I jump back into the conversation mode, which allows two people who speak different languages to have a conversation with each other, there's this new icon in the upper right corner, and if I tap this, then partially fold my phone, the person you're speaking with will be able to see everything you're saying in their language on the cover screen, and you'll still be able to see the conversation in your language on your screen. And this just makes it easier to have a face-to-face conversation instead of a side-by-side conversation where you're standing next to each other looking at the phone. Note Assist adds the ability to transcribe and summarize voice recordings right from within the Samsung Notes application. Previously, that had to be done in the voice recorder application. Transcript Assist is exactly the same as Voice Recorder with no changes here. Samsung Internet and Browsing Assist are the same again. They both let you summarize and translate whatever's on a web page. So if there's a super long news article that you don't feel like reading, you could just summarize it to get quick details. The photo editor is now Photo Assist, and instead of just having the generative edit that existed before, it now also has Portrait Studio. To get to this, just navigate to a photo in your gallery app, then tap the Galaxy AI icon, then tap Portrait Studio. This will allow you to turn your face into a comic, 3D cartoon, watercolor, or sketch. The Fold 6 also gets 3 brand new sections. The first one is Drawing Assist, which allows you to hand draw something and then use AI to convert it to a more realistic or more artistic looking image. And sometimes this works great, while other times it works, well, not so good. Maybe that's just a reflection of my poor drawing skills. The next new feature is Photo Ambient Wallpaper, and what this does is change whatever photo you used as your wallpaper based on the time and weather. And it currently supports sunny, rainy, or snowy weather. But this only works for your lock screen wallpaper, not your home screen wallpaper. And the last new option is Health Assist, but this is actually unlocked when you connect a new Samsung accessory like maybe a Galaxy Watch Ultra or Galaxy Watch 7. And what this will do is give you an energy score, as well as some tips for improving your health. But since these features are enabled with Samsung's recent accessories, I can actually just jump into the Samsung Health application on my Z Fold 3, and you can see my energy score right there, and any tips will show up in this star menu as well. So this is not a Fold 6 exclusive feature. There's one more extremely important thing to point out when talking about all of these new features, and it's that the Fold 5 will absolutely be getting these features in a future update. So if you're looking to upgrade the Fold 5 just for the software features that come on the Fold 6, you're better off just waiting for those features to come to the Fold 5 in a future update. The Fold 4, on the other hand, is pretty likely to get these AI updates, but not definitely. If you're considering upgrading from the Fold 4 specifically for the software features on the Fold 6, I'd consider waiting a bit to see if the Fold 4 is going to get the updates. But it's more of a toss-up if the Fold 3 will get these. If you connect one of Samsung's latest accessories like the Galaxy Buds 3 Pro tier phone, you'll notice another significant difference between the Fold 6 and the previous generation Folds. So if I jump into the sound quality and effects menu here, you'll see that I get a few more options on the Fold 6 compared to the previous generations. Specifically, you get this boost dialogue option, which will make it easier to hear voices in videos where there's a lot of background noise. And you also get a loudness normalization option, which will prevent sounds from getting too loud or too quiet when you're switching between different media. So if you're listening to a super quiet video, then you switch to your music and the music happens to be a lot louder, it's actually going to bring that volume down instead of just destroying your ears. And you also get this advanced quality options at the bottom, and this allows you to enable ultra high quality audio and super wideband speech. And the super wideband speech is especially useful because it makes your calls a lot more clear. Fortunately, these features should be coming to the Fold 5, but the Fold 4 and Fold 3 likely won't get these features because these are dependent on the phone's processor. And the further back you go, the less powerful the processor, and the less likely it'll be able to run these features. Fortunately, if you're using something like Samsung's brand new Galaxy Watch Ultra, you do still get all of the same features with that device, with 2 exceptions, and the first one is in this Manage Content section. None of these previous devices currently support syncing a story from your gallery to the watch, but that's such a minor thing that I'm sure that's going to come in a future update. And the second thing that's missing is the AI-powered suggested replies that I mentioned earlier. If you haven't figured out which folds are worth upgrading by now, let me make it even easier for you. Here's a chart with simplified categories and whether or not each individual device is worth upgrading to the Fold 6 in that specific category. And a maybe rating just means that it might be worth upgrading depending on your personal needs. So it's up to you to decide which of these categories are important to you. But also keep in mind that I have links in the description and pinned comment to a huge limited time deal that Samsung's currently running where you can get a free storage upgrade and massive trade-in and bundle deals. So when you account for that, the Fold 6 looks even more enticing. And those are affiliate links, so if you want to support the channel at no extra cost to you, using those links is a great way to do it. And you can click this video here if you want to see some incredible Galaxy Watch Ultra features. That's it for this tech episode. God bless, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.